This anime begins with the protagonist, Duke of Death, who lives in an isolated mansion away from the world because his parents decided to send him there due to the curse he received from a witch. This curse allows him to take the life of anything he touches. One morning, while writing a letter to his parents questioning the curse, his servant with whom he lives in that mansion appears. She is a beautiful young woman with blue eyes named Alice Lendrot, who seizes every opportunity to flirt with him as he cannot touch her due to the curse he carries. During breakfast that morning, our protagonist has a conversation with his servant about the letter he wrote. She begins to flirt, but he nervously asks her to stop and quit harassing him. She apologizes, stating that she can't help herself. He then asks her to prioritize her safety since she is the only maid willing to be with him, knowing about his curse, and he doesn't want to lose her. However, she seems to ignore his concerns and offers him a cookie. Despite being surprised by her actions, he attempts to bite the cookie but panics and moves away. She teasingly tells him it was an indirect kiss, causing the protagonist to blush and ask her not to say it out loud. Throughout the day, the Duke recounts how the witch cursed him when he was only 5 years old. He wonders who the witch was and why she did it. He remembers her voice telling him that no one would love him and he couldn't love anyone, leading to a miserable life. Due to this, he hasn't been able to see his family since, as his mother turned her back on him, leaving him in the mansion in the forest. While lost in thought, a butterfly crosses his path, and in an attempt not to touch it, he falls, unintentionally taking the life of a tree branch. His servant appears, asking what he was doing, and once again flirts with him. The next day, a childhood friend named Philip decides to visit the protagonist, who hasn't had any visitors since being sent to the mansion. The Duke feels excited and nervous about the visit, as Philip was the only person who didn't abandon him due to his condition. However, he becomes disappointed when he sees Philip accompanied by bodyguards, and his friend acts nervous around him. Before leaving, Philip asks the servant to accompany him to the bathroom, but he uses this opportunity to interrogate Alice. He tells her to leave the mansion, stating it's dangerous to be with the Duke, but she refuses. The protagonist, overhearing the conversation, confronts Philip, upset that he disrespected his servant, and asks for the real reason behind his visit. Philip confesses that his mother sent him to check on the Duke and reveals that his younger brother will inherit the family title, likely severing ties with him. Despite trying to appear indifferent, the Duke is thoughtful and expresses regret in front of Alice for not having reciprocated love. She encourages him, promising to stand by his side, and they vow to break the curse together. She assures him that someday she will give him a ring. The next morning, as the protagonist reads a book, Alice appears again and flirts with him, causing the Duke to blush and feel nervous. On that day, the butler, an elderly man with an eye patch named Rob, arrives at the mansion. He apologizes to the Duke for being absent due to a back injury, but also apologizes to the servant, Alice, as she had to take care of the young man alone. The boy is concerned about his butler, who, despite recovering from the injury, is working hard since his return. The Duke has great appreciation for Rob, who has been with him since childhood, and since he moved to the mansion, considering him like a father. Therefore, he suggests sharing household tasks with Alice. While walking down the hallway, worried about Rob, the Duke is approached by him from behind. In an attempt to find Alice, Rob merely touches the Duke, who, frightened, moves away, shouting that it's him. The butler apologizes with a smile, explaining that due to old age, he's becoming a bit blind. The young man scolds him, expressing concern that the aging butler might accidentally touch him and cause harm. However, the old man seems not to hear him well. At that moment, the servant appears, and while the butler asks if she is the real Alice, the young man worries about him. The butler reassures him, saying he will serve him for life, but hurts his back again while attempting to bow. Later, the protagonist is playing the piano in the living room, a skill he developed since childhood and received praise for. He started practicing and composing songs since he arrived at the mansion in case his family decides to disinherit him. During the practice, Alice interrupts, unable to resist approaching when she hears the beautiful melody. He invites her to stay with him to listen to his song. As Alice listens to the melody, she starts thinking about the Duke, and when he finishes, he confesses that he wrote it for her. The next day, Viola, the Duke's sister with red hair, visits the mansion secretly. While having tea, she notices that her brother likes his servant. Interrogating him, he gets nervous and only says he holds her dear. Viola decides to help him conquer her, thinking her brother is in love, but it's just an excuse to tease him. Before leaving, she asks her brother to try to break the curse and return home. As she leaves, Viola stumbles upon the butler, Rob, realizing that her visit was just to see him, as she is in love with him. That same night, a small cat appears in the mansion in front of the Duke, who desperately calls his servant to take it out, fearing he might harm it. The cat chases the young man with the intention of attacking him. After capturing it, they realize the cat had a note saying, "Please forgive me." The young man immediately thinks of his mother and feels abandoned, just like the cat. However, more cats appear, and he realizes he has found a new family, just as he did with Alice and Rob. Later, while the Duke observes the moon through a room, Alice approaches him. He tells her that his grandfather used to dance there with the servant's mother. Determined, he invites her to dance without physical contact, and she gladly agrees. The next day, the Duke is playing billiards when suddenly Alice proposes a competition in which the loser will do whatever the winner wants. Due to a mistake by the young man, he loses the bet and his servant is declared the winner. She seizes the opportunity to ask the Duke to do whatever she wants. He imagines she might ask for something indecent, but he is completely mistaken. She requests that he accompany her for a stroll in the village, particularly to a festival where the locals will be dressed in costumes. She suggests he wear a sufficiently thick costume to avoid touching anyone and enjoy a day outside the mansion amidst the crowd. At the festival, the Duke is dressed in a heavy costume to prevent accidental contact with anyone, which seems to be working. However, while walking, he eventually falls and gets lost in the crowd. As Alice searches for the Duke, a strange woman approaches her, mistaking her for her mother and commenting on their striking resemblance before mysteriously walking away. The Duke encounters a lost crying child and decides to comfort him by playing a song on a piano in the middle of the square. Not only does the child cheer up, but the entire town is delighted by his melody. The lost child's mother appears, and along with Alice, they decide to spend the rest of the day together. As they stroll through the festival, the Duke learns about rumors surrounding him and his curse. Later in the evening, they visit a tower where Alice shares a local legend about a princess who married the moon. The Duke immediately relates it to them, expressing his love for her and lamenting the distance between them. He confesses his love, regretting that they are on a date and can't embrace. Surprised by his words, Alice tells him that she had a lovely day with him and wants him to stay by her side always, even if they can't touch each other. Before the night ends, Alice sends a letter to the Duke, inviting him to her room in case he can't sleep. When he tries to enter, he notices that the servant doesn't have any clothes, so he promptly closes the door, asking her to get dressed. Once inside, she prepares tea for him and, after finishing it, asks him to lie down on her bed. The Duke starts imagining what the servant might be plotting again, but he is once again mistaken. She only intended to help him sleep peacefully in her room and apologizes for giving him a wrong impression. Before falling asleep, the Duke asks Alice to accompany him somewhere in a few days. As the days pass, they have a second date, this time by the lake to witness a meteor shower and seize the romantic moment. They both confess their feelings towards each other, but accidentally, Alice falls into the water while trying to grab the Duke's hat. In the water, she asks for a kiss, finding it romantic despite the risk to her life. Although the young man agrees, he regrets it when so close to her, and Alice, unsatisfied, pushes him off the boat into the water. As they dry off after leaving the lake, the Duke openly expresses regret for not taking the opportunity to confess his feelings. Alice hears him and asks what he wanted to confess, to which he replies that he likes her a lot but panics and withdraws. After the events of the previous night at the lake, the Duke continues to regret rejecting the kiss from Alice, thinking that he may have hurt her feelings. At that moment, he is interrupted by his butler and his servant bringing him books that have arrived. As Alice enters, he notices that she ignores him and doesn't act as she did before. Concerned about her change in behavior, he attempts to start a conversation, but she responds with coldness. Desperate for her usual attention, he thinks it might be because of rejecting the kiss, but he soon realizes it's because she's ill from falling into the lake. He decides to take care of her. In the evening, as the young man prepares to rest, Alice is feeling better and gives the Duke a scarf she knitted herself. They promise to go out and have fun in the snow the next day. The next day, with snow covering everything, Alice and the Duke go out to enjoy themselves. Rob decides to make a snowman, but they end up involving him in their game. Upon entering the mansion, Alice realizes she is missing her mother's earring. Upon hearing this, the Duke goes out again to search for it in the midst of the intensifying snowfall. At one point, he seems to tire and faints in the snow. A white bat appears, transforming into the mysterious person Alice met at the festival. Seeing the young man in the snow, she wakes him up. He asks her not to come close, revealing that he is cursed, and explains that he is looking for his servant's earring. Despite her surprise, she asks to be invited inside for some food as she is hungry. The young man faints again, and the stranger begins to melt the snow to find the earring. The Duke wakes up again, this time due to the warmth produced by the girl, and she confesses that she is a witch named Cuff. The protagonist allows the witch into his mansion as she helps him and to ask her questions about witches. Upon entering, they encounter Alice, who is worried about the Duke. The witch grabs the young woman and asks her to show her the way to take a shower. Later, while Cuff is feeding, the young man decides to ask her questions about his curse, the witch who cursed him, and if she could help break the curse. Although initially reluctant to answer, she eventually agrees. However, she tells him that not all witches are friends and she probably can't help him as it happened a long time ago. She shares details about her life and how both she and all witches deal with witch hunts. She mentions that her father was human but died at the hands of witch hunters, and since then she doesn't feel aligned with any group. After Alice hands her the repaired robe, the witch continues on her way. The next day, Alice leaves the mansion and recalls a childhood moment in the snow where children tease her for being the daughter of a maid. The Duke approaches her to help, but the young man interrupts that memory and realizes that she seems a bit strange and might wish for him to hug her. It's a new day, and Miss Viola returns to the mansion to visit her brother. She enters the room where the Duke is, but her attitude quickly changes when she notices that the young man is in the company of the butler. She becomes somewhat shy in front of him because she is in love with Rob. While Viola and the Duke have tea with desserts prepared by the servant, the Duke's sister wonders what kind of woman Alice is. She decides to find out and teaches her charming techniques using the Viola method. Once finished, she shows the results to the young man, who falls under her charms again. However, the butler arrives to inform Viola that her servant is waiting for her to return home. She freezes again in Rob's presence, and her brother tells her that he used his charm method on the old man. However, she becomes nervous and her plan fails, so she leaves for her home. The next day, Viola returns to the mansion, hoping to visit Rob more than her brother. In the kitchen, they decide to bake bread. The Duke leaves his sister with the butler so they can talk, but she finds it difficult to do so despite being a very extroverted person. Later, she confesses to the butler that she envies her brother because despite his curse, he seems happy with the company of his servants who provide emotional support. Rob responds that he is glad to know that she also cares for the young Duke. As Viola is about to return home, the butler stops her to ask her to take the bread they both made and tells her he hopes for her visit again. The next morning, Alice is skating while the young man watches from the edge of the rink. Next to him is a white crow who asks if he has seen someone lost in the forest. Confused because he heard the bird speak, the Duke thinks it's an illusion caused by his fall and head injury. However, the crow asks if he is one of theirs because he possesses magical energy. The young man, surprised, explains that it's because he has a curse and tells about meeting a lost witch named Cuff, who seems to be his friend. As they converse, the young man realizes that the crow is staring fixedly at Alice while she skates. When the servant approaches, the bird introduces itself to her as Zane, a magic user, or rather a witch. The Duke notices a complete change in Zane's attitude when Alice appears. She shows the two guys that she found Cuff hiding in her chest as she was in the lake and seemed cold. Later, they all enjoy an afternoon together skating on the lake. Before Cuff and Zane leave, they inform the Duke that there will be a gathering of witches on the next Red Moon night, and they want to take him so he can investigate the witch who cursed him. Alice takes the opportunity to ask the young man if she can accompany him as she wants to find out about the strange woman she encountered at the festival. That night, Viola knocks on Alice's door to spend the night with her since her brother didn't allow her to stay in the butler's room. She confesses that she is in love with Rob and asks Alice to keep it a secret. Alice in turn reveals that she is in love with a young man who she considers a Prince Charming, as he saved her life when she needed it, making her life worth living, referring to the Duke. As time passes before falling asleep, Viola confesses that she sees Alice as an older sister since her mother always paid attention only to her brothers, and she always wanted someone to pamper her. At that moment, the Duke appears, who had been looking for his sister throughout the mansion. Alice asks him to take care of his sister when she wakes up, as that's what she needs. The next day, the protagonist and Alice decide to go to the mansion's conservatory to read. However, the young man notices that it is somewhat neglected due to the number of plants that have grown. He decides to help the servant by drying the leaves and shrubs to clean faster. Later, he sees Alice looking at beautiful blue flowers and asks her to wither them to finish cleaning. After doing so, he makes her a crown with the same flowers, which she says she will treasure like the flower he gave her. That night, the young man cannot sleep, but he hears Alice's voice. Worried, he rushes out only to find her without clothes, explaining that a cat stole her dress while she was showering. They both go out to look for the cat, and upon finding it, they realize that it scratched her cherished dress, as the young man had previously told her she looked cute in it. Finally, the night of the Red Moon arrives, and Cuff along with Zane go to the mansion to find the Duke. They ask him to prepare to leave, giving them a tunic to conceal their human scent. Through a mirror in the mansion, they open a portal to a completely different world where the witches have different appearances. As the meeting begins, the strange woman from the festival Daleth introduces herself as the leader of the witches. Although the meeting is short, Cuff tries to stall so that the young man can gather information about the witch. However, it is Alice who approaches the leader, who recognizes her. When asked if her mother had any relation with the witches, Daleth, with his suspicious tone, claims not to really know her, having only seen her. The witch also recognizes the Duke and his curse, mentioning that she knows the witch who cursed him but cannot help him. The said witch died some time ago, and breaking the curse is beyond her knowledge, as it was not a common curse, and the witch was powerful. Tired of the questions, Daleth burns their tunic, exposing them to all the witches present, who immediately detect their scent and begin to chase them. At one point, a witch is about to catch Alice with a vine, but the young man manages to stop her by grabbing and drying it, saving his servant. They run to the mirror portal until they can finally escape. Once safely back in the mansion, the protagonist asks the witches why they helped him, considering they barely know each other. Cuff confesses that when she met him, she wished to be his friend, making the young man happy to hear this as he only has his servants. As they are about to leave, the witches tell the Duke that the next time they visit, they will be his friends. A new day arrives, and Alice receives an enormous magical vase she bought in the village, apparently crafted by a witch. Upon looking inside, they find a recipe book and decide to cook something. In the kitchen, the girl tells the young man that the book contains spells and that she will make a love potion. They light the magical vase through a spell, add the ingredients, and Alice asks the Duke to stir, instructing him to think only of things that make him happy. He can only think of his servant. Once they finish the potion, the girl confesses that they were actually making a potion to break his curse. Aware of this, the Duke takes a sip of the potion, and they test it with a flower to see if the curse is broken, but it ends up withering. indicating that their plan did not work. The young man then tells her that breaking the curse will be difficult since the leader of the witches told him it was not a common curse. Still, he thanks his servant for caring and trying to help him. She tells him that she will continue searching for other ways to break the spell. Stating that the magical vase didn't work, the Duke gives it to the butler, who, upon realizing the vase is alive, becomes excited, as does the vase, happy to have an elegant owner. They leave together, but the Duke notices a strange presence behind him and turns around to see his younger sister Viola, who seems a bit jealous of the gift to Rob. At that moment, Viola's mother begins to notice her absence. Meanwhile, Alice finds it difficult to play sheet music and proposes to the Duke to play it, as she found out that whoever can play it perfectly will be free from a curse. He agrees and starts playing the piano. At that moment, he can see the ghost of the author of that melody, who only bothers him to distract him. Still, the young man concentrates and finishes playing the song perfectly, only to find out that it was a deception and it only freed him from the curse of the ghost author. The next day, the Duke looks for his servant in her room to go to the mansion, remembering his sister telling him about something called a hanging bridge, where scaring someone makes their heart race, often confused with love. Therefore, he decides to scare Alice by hiding, but it doesn't work. Later at the mansion, he tries again by telling her a terrifying story, but it fails. He then attempts to show her a frightening painting, but when searching for it, he notices that it mysteriously appeared hanging. This time, in his attempt to scare Alice, he ends up frightened and he enters a crisis since he couldn't scare his servant or make his heart race. The butler appears, revealing that Alice was the one who hung the painting the night before to scare the Duke, but he can't hear him due to his fear. Terrified and not knowing how the vase ended up on the wall, he accidentally knocks over a vase with a plant valued by Rob, who eerily asks the young man not to touch them as they are precious to him. Scared, the Duke runs to hide from his butler. Later, Alice finds the Duke hiding in a closet, claiming to be hiding from Rob until he calms down. So she asks her servant to close the door, but does so while hiding with him. There, she tells the young man that when the butler gets angry, he doesn't forgive until you reflect on your actions. They hear Rob approaching, and the servant tells the Duke that she will protect him, but gets too close, causing the Duke to come out of the closet, frightened once the butler moves away. They end up hiding under a bed, where Alice takes the opportunity to ask the young man if he feels anxious about growing up. While trying to touch his hand, Rob finds them, showing the Duke some jewelry that belonged to his mother and grandmother found in the remains of the broken pot. Apparently, his former servant tried to steal them but never returned to retrieve them, so he congratulates the Duke for finding them but tells him that they need to talk about breaking that pot. On another different day, we see Cuff paying a visit to the Duke, but instead of having a conversation, the young man and his servants are helping the witch write and read. She wants to surprise her friend Zane, who is currently at the circus where they occasionally work. On the same day, Viola prepares to visit the Duke's mansion, but she is stopped by her other brother, Walter. He seems proud of his physical appearance and being the next heir of the family, but his confidence crumbles when Viola tells him that it won't happen if their older brother manages to break the curse, since he is the firstborn and Walter is only the second son. While having tea, Walter expresses his dislike for his brother being the firstborn and because their mother still believes he can break the curse. Viola, not paying much attention to her brother's concerns, only wants to go to the mansion. Walter becomes desperate upon hearing this and asks her why she is on the side of their older brother and not him. However, Viola makes it clear that she is not on anyone's side and leaves. Walter heads to lunch with his mother, covering for his sister, saying she went to visit a friend. Once Viola arrives at the mansion, she sees Cuff alone in one of the rooms grabbing an ornament. Thinking she's a thief, Viola tries to catch her to let Rob congratulate her. After several attempts, she ties the witch's hands and sits on top of her so she can't escape. However, she notices that Cuff is not worried about the situation until Cuff reveals that she's a friend of the Duke. At that moment, the servants arrive with the Duke, who, upon seeing the uncomfortable situation, decides to leave the two women alone. Later, Alice and the Duke are in the young man's room playing chess on a cold night due to the storm. At that moment, both remember the day Alice arrived at the mansion. It was a snowy day, and the young man was in his messy, dark room, deeply depressed. Rob enters and informs him that he hired a servant with his mother's permission. Alice approaches the room, introducing herself and expressing joy at seeing him again since they knew each other from childhood. Annoyed, he claims not to remember her, as he hated his entire childhood and doesn't want to recall that time. He asks her to return home as it is dangerous for her to be there with him. However, the butler decides to take her to her room. She chooses a room outside the mansion used for storage in very poor condition, but she claims to feel more comfortable in such places. The next morning, the Duke realizes that the servant is still in the mansion and reproaches her about the revealing uniform she is wearing. She teases him about the hat he is wearing, making him blush and get annoyed at changing the subject. The young man is irritated by the servant's presence all the time and tries to distance her by asking her to leave. Seeing that she doesn't leave, he conditions her to clean his room in 3 days, and if she fails, she will be fired. The next day, the Duke is surprised that she managed to organize his room in just one night. She tells him she did it to show that he can count on her. Overwhelmed with tears in his eyes, he confesses that he only wanted to dismiss her to keep her safe. However, she sits next to him to comfort him until his tears disappear. That night, the young man is in the forest during a snowstorm and leaves a note saying he will leave if Alice does not leave the mansion. He starts freezing, feeling sad, lonely, and defeated. He falls into the snow, thinking he is about to die. At that precise moment, he remembers Alice, the little girl he met in his childhood whom he wished to see again but forgot due to his curse. Closing his eyes, he hears the voice of his servant and realizes it is her. She went to look for him because she was worried about him and took him back to the mansion. Once there, their great friendship begins, lasting until the present day. The young Duke, waking up from that memory, realizes that Alice won the chess game as he was distracted, and she took advantage of the moment to move the pieces. It's Christmas Eve, and the Duke is excited to celebrate Christmas with his servants and wizard friends after a long time. Meanwhile, Viola is at home, visiting her mother in her room. Her mother advises her to stay home for Christmas and suggests changing her outfit as it appears too childish. Later, accompanied by Walter, who acts as the chauffeur, they head to visit her brother. At the mansion, the Duke is concerned about the lack of Christmas decorations for his guests. As Alice heads to the mansion to give a Christmas gift to the butler, Walter drives the carriage as he wanted to see the condition of his older brother. The Duke suddenly feels chills, and without thinking, Alice asks if he wants her to warm him up. However, they are interrupted by the witches Cuff and Zane, who bring Christmas decorations believing in Santa. After finishing the decoration, including the Christmas tree, Cuff shows the result to her friend, and Zane tells her it looks as beautiful as she does. The witch falls asleep to wait for Santa at midnight, and Zane, annoyed, gently lays her down to rest. Later, Viola arrives at the mansion excited to see Rob. Along the way, she loses her gift, which Walter picks up. Inside the mansion, he finds a Santa Claus costume and uses it to disguise himself. However, Cuff sees him and thinks he is the real Santa. To get rid of her, Walter gives her the lost gift from Viola and tries to escape, but the witch excitedly chases him around the mansion. Meanwhile, Viola searches for her lost gift and unexpectedly falls through the chimney, covered in soot. Walter is scolded by his sister for following her, and the Duke realizes he is his brother, whom he hasn't seen in years. Despite showing some joy at the reunion, his brother expresses otherwise, stating that he will inherit the family's power. Cuff interrupts, asking if they've seen Santa as she lost sight of him. Viola notices that she has the gift she intended for Rob, and after a dispute, the witch reluctantly hands it over after burning it. After Walter leaves the mansion waiting outside for his sister, everyone enjoys a beautiful Christmas Eve together. After the festivities, the wizards leave and the Duke and Alice walk in the snow. The young man recalls a day similar to that one when he was lying in the snow and she saved him from freezing to death. Since that day, everything changed and they promised to live their lives together. Following the events, we now see Alice dreaming of a childhood memory living in the mansion. She wanders through the rooms, somewhat lost, until her mother, Sharon, finds her. It turns out Sharon also worked for the Duke's family and was a beloved and skilled servant. As they head to their respective rooms, they cross paths with the young Duke, who was a child at the time and didn't have the curse. He greets Alice, causing her to blush. Sharon notices that her daughter escaped her room just to see the young boy and tells her she won't stand in her way, wanting to protect her no matter what. However, Alice wakes up feeling somewhat melancholic due to this memory. The next morning, the Duke's family is having lunch, but Viola notices her mother is upset because none of her children spent Christmas with her. She blames her brother Walter, while he blames his older brother. In the village, Cuff is shopping and her friend Zane secretly follows her to ensure her safety. He had promised Viola to stop protecting her so much, as it hindered her ability to handle things on her own. Although he agrees, he can't help but follow her and assist in every situation that arises, realizing that she can manage without him. During the night, the Duke roams the mansion unable to sleep. Alice suggests they sleep together, and once in bed, he becomes extremely nervous with the person he loves beside him. As she sleeps, he starts admiring her beauty, but she notices and playfully teases him by undressing, making him even more nervous. The young Duke then reveals that his mother wouldn't approve of them sharing a bed without being married. When Alice asks about his thoughts on his mother, he sadly admits to having no strong feelings for her. He learns from his brother Walter that she had been waiting for him, and he believes that if he breaks the curse, they might reconcile and be a family again. He tells Alice that if that happens, he can tell his mother about them and they can get married. However, Alice interrupts him, asking him not to do it. Surprised, he responds that maybe he should think first about breaking the curse. He then asks Alice to leave the room as he wishes each other good night. Upon leaving, Alice feels sad, thinking that if the Duke breaks the curse, he will have to return home to be with his family and become the heir. The next morning, while the butler smokes a cigar, the Duke excitedly shows him the gift Alice gave him, gloves she knitted herself. The elderly man realizes that the young man is smiling more often. The servant calls the young man through a mansion window and he heads inside while the butler remains seated outside, recalling the time when Rob was assigned to take care of the Duke after he was cursed. He initially feared not the curse, but the responsibility of caring for a child. As the boy grew, they had arguments due to everything happening to him. The young man started isolating himself in his room, and due to the loneliness, his fear turned into a desire to end his life. He thought he needed someone his age to talk to, so he turned to Alice, who has become the most important person to the Duke today. The butler notes that Alice knows her purpose there. Despite that, the night before, the young woman visited the elderly man in his room to share her feelings. He tells her that destiny brought them together again, and whatever happens in the future depends on them. But the decision they make will make him happy. At night, the Duke is playing the piano and Alice accompanies him, singing a song as he plays a melody. Eventually, both of them sing together. Days pass, and now we see Viola and her brother Walter in a room in their mansion, searching for clues about the curse of the witch who cursed their older brother. The young woman finds a notebook with records of the servants who passed through their home. She rushes out of the room, asking Walter to clean up the mess they made. On the way, she encounters her mother, who notices her dirty clothes. Viola asks her servant to dress her daughter, and then Viola shows her mother the new dress she made. The mother insists that Viola should start dressing like that from now on, abandoning the childish clothes she usually wears. This upsets Viola, and she goes to the Duke's mansion to tell him what happened. She asks to stay with him and live as his servant with the butler. Rob arrives and comments that the dress makes her look more adorable. Viola suddenly changes her mind and decides to start dressing that way. At night, Alice takes Viola to her room to stay with her. Upon entering, they notice that Cuff is already there, having entered the room without permission to visit Alice. They decide to have a sleepover with the three of them. After talking during the night, Viola gives Alice the book she found in her home, thanking her for what she does for the Duke. Outside the room, an owl is watching them, and through its eyes, the witch Daleth is observing, saying it's time to intervene. She calls Zane, asking him to send a message to their friends. The next day at the mansion, Alice is reading the servant records with Rob. She reads that 2 women in white have come to the mansion and asks the butler if he remembers anything from that time, but unfortunately, he doesn't. She believes it might be the leader of the witches and another person. Zane arrives to deliver the witch's message to be friends and stay away from the witches. He observes the book Alice has but tells the Duke to go spend time outside. Once the cursed young man gets distracted, Zane loses sight of him, finding him on the mansion's roof with the record's notebook. Zane intends to burn it, but hears the Duke's voice, realizing his plan. Zane reveals that Daleth not only sent a message, but also instructed him to destroy the book or Cuff would be harmed. The book likely contains information that the witch wants to keep secret and might help the young man break his curse. The Duke decides not to burn it and hands it over to Zane. However, the young man asks him to burn it since his friends are more important to him. Seizing the opportunity, Zane uses his hidden power to destroy things and asks the young man for help in deceiving the witch since she was watching. The Duke agrees. In the mansion, the Duke lies to Alice, saying he took the record book to read it. He tells her that he will always protect her no matter what happens. That night, while Zane and the Duke destroy the book, the witch leader watches and realizes they are trying to deceive her. As she removes her mask and heads to a small room, she decides to leave things as they are while observing the body of Alice's mother. The next day, when Rob is at the mansion's door, he receives a letter from the main mansion. Upon giving it to the Duke, it asks him to visit, stating they need to talk. After the events, the day arrives for the Duke to visit his mother. He tells Alice that he feels nervous because he hasn't seen his mother since he was a child. However, he also feels overwhelmed because he wanted to see her again after breaking his curse, but it won't happen that way. Upon hearing this, the servant offers to accompany him and he accepts, thinking that once he sees his mother, he will tell her about Alice. Upon arrival, his younger siblings are waiting for them. Viola informs him that their mother is waiting and that he has to go alone. The servant, without any problem, agrees to visit the household staff in the meantime. Viola and Walter lead their older brother to meet their mother. In the hallway, some servants seem to observe the young man with fear. At the end of the hallway, they reach their mother's room. Before entering, Walter confesses that he told their mother that Viola has been visiting him, and that might be the reason for the summons. He enters the room and is surprised to see his mother, but she informs him that despite 10 years passing, he couldn't break the curse. The young man apologizes and says it will take a bit longer. His mother suggests they talk in the morning and advises him to go to rest as it is late. Outside, his siblings are waiting and Viola tells him that their mother is in a good mood. However, the young man is surprised because for him, it wasn't like that, as he is accustomed to the kindness of his servants. Meanwhile, Alice meets the servants and one of them hugs her, apologizing for not helping her when her mother passed away. Alice returns the hug, remembering her mother's embrace. That servant takes Alice to her mother's room to spend the night there. However, they encounter the Duke's mother, who mistakes Alice for her mother Sharon, calling her by name. Later, realizing her mistake, the Duke's mother leaves. The servant tells Alice that both were very close friends, but after Sharon's death, the lady changed her behavior. The next morning, Viola takes the Duke to the place where the witch cursed him. Upon arrival, Viola mentions that a servant told her it happened in front of a grave. At that moment, the young man begins to recall the incident. It was a spring day, and he was there looking for a 4-leaf clover for Alice when suddenly smoke surrounded him, and a woman grabbed him from behind, uttering the phrase that cursed him. After her words, the 4-leaf clover in his hands withered, and from that moment on, he remained cursed. As they walk through the area, they encounter their mother, who scolds Viola for being too close to her brother, deeming it dangerous. She asks them not to miss dinner since they will talk then. After she leaves, the Duke worries about Viola, but she tells him she's used to her mother's treatment and wishes she could live with him. But neither can her brother Walter. In the evening, dinner time arrives, and like in his childhood, the Duke is seated in the corner of the table, away from his siblings and mother. About to take the first bite, his mother informs her children that their father's condition is worsening, and they must decide on an heir as soon as possible. She puts a condition on the Duke to break his curse before spring. Otherwise, his brother Walter would become the heir. The young man accepts. Seizing the opportunity, he talks about Alice, asking for approval to marry her. However, his mother refuses, stating that he should only focus on breaking the curse and being the family heir. In response, the young man, upset and agitated, confronts his mother, saying that Alice was the only person who loved him despite his curse. She treated him like a normal person, saved him from misery and darkness when his mother abandoned him without concern for him or his siblings. The young man gathers courage and shouts that he will marry his servant, surprising his siblings. As he leaves the dinner, his siblings decide to accompany him, while his mother remains seated, proud that her son was the only one who had the courage to confront her and sees how he has grown. Upon leaving the mansion, Alice is waiting for him by the carriage, and both brothers bid the Duke a friendly farewell as he heads home. The protagonist is building a house of cards when Alice appears, surprising the boy. The servant tells him that instead of playing, he should be searching for a way to break the spell since his mother gave him a time limit. However, he just wants to get rid of the curse regardless of what happens with the inheritance. That same night, Cuff and Zane are working at the circus. A little boy thanks Cuff for bringing him into the circus since he used to be a thief in his past. He gives the witch a flower and asks her to wait until he grows up to be worthy of her. Zane arrives, telling him he is still too young to seduce a woman. Later, when the witches are alone, Zane tells Cuff that her friend, when she went to the demon realm, gathered a couple of magical objects, and she handed them to Cuff. She says she will tell Alice about it since there might be a clue on how to break the Duke's curse. The wizard then asks her how she would like to live her life as a witch or a human, explaining that if she doesn't use her powers, she can live more peacefully now that she has friends and it will be less dangerous than when she's with him. However, she responds that no matter what she chooses, she wants to be with him. In the demon realm, the leader notices Zane's power to manipulate time through objects. The next day, Cuff visits the Duke and Alice at the mansion and starts using her firepower since she can't do it at the circus. However, the young couple tells her to stop because things are heating up, so she suggests getting into a pool that Zane brought. Alice is the only one who accepts, and both girls get into bikinis, while the Duke tries to pass the time while they have fun. However, it starts getting warmer, and Alice asks him to get into the pool to cool off. Due to the heat, he stumbles and corners the servant against the wall. Both become nervous about the situation and how close they are, so the young man quickly backs away. After refreshing themselves in the pool, Cuff gives the Duke a gift sent by Zane. When he opens the magical box, he gets sucked into a world where his wishes come true. Alice is there dressed as a bunny, and another version of her shows him different rooms in the place, one with many versions of the servant, another where his little sister tells him she's proud of him, and one where he plays the piano in front of thousands of people. When opening the next door, Alice sees that he wants to marry her but stops, and they decide to leave that place. Once outside that world, Alice puts away the box, telling him that she enjoyed seeing what he desires, making the young man happy. The Duke is at the mansion while Alice is teaching him to play mini golf, but she distracts him the whole time by teasing him with insinuations. Meanwhile, Viola asks her brother Walter for help because she wants to practice makeup using his face, as her mother forbade her to do it on herself. Walter agrees, and in her room, Viola finishes applying makeup on him. She also dresses him up and puts on a wig, and the young man likes the result. He devises a plan to win over his brother and become the heir of the family. Viola takes advantage of the opportunity, bringing Walter to her brother, introducing him as a fan who is a servant, and leaves them alone with Alice for their amusement while she goes to find the butler. Despite the Duke not believing that Walter is his fan, he invites him to play golf since he has been practicing with Alice. Although Walter tries to converse with him, he communicates only through written messages to avoid being discovered. While playing golf, the Duke realizes that Walter is not good at it, so he proposes that if he wins in a single shot, they would get married. The young man becomes nervous and confused by Walter's request, and Walter achieves his goal in the game, asking him to fulfill his promise. The Duke informs him that he never agreed and apologizes, stating that his heart already belongs to someone else. Later, the Duke starts to notice that Walter's voice is the same as his younger brother's. Later at the circus, Cuff is practicing for the show, and Zane watches her. At that moment, the little boy Hugo, who also works there, arrives to bring juice to the witch, who he admires. Despite being just a child, Zane becomes jealous of him. Their boss arrives and advises Zane to confess his feelings to Cuff, assuring them that he won't interfere and that they can share their desires when they decide. Both Zane and Cuff are surprised by his words. At night, the Duke is about to have tea served by Alice when everything around him turns dark. The leader of the witches appears in front of him, saying that while he is conscious in that world and the real world, he is completely unconscious, and Alice tries to wake him up. The witch informs him that she wants to see him to tell him she's looking for a wizard with the power to manipulate time at will, realizing she's referring to Zane. She asks him to convince his friend to use magic for her, but the Duke refuses as he cannot ask Zane, who has been hiding his powers for some reason. Learning his response, she tries to persuade him by mentioning that helping her could break his curse. Meanwhile, Zane recalls the day he met his friend Cuff and reveals that he hasn't used his powers since his parents died when he unsuccessfully tried to save them. In the mansion's hall, the Duke asks if she was the one who cursed him, but the witch responds negatively, revealing that she knows another witch who will visit him soon and may break his curse, but in return, he must convince Zane. Upon regaining consciousness, the Duke tells Alice that Daleth visited him and asked for a favor, mentioning that a witch will visit him soon, and they notice he has a business card with a drawing of an octopus in his hand. During one night, Alice is walking through the mansion hallway in the darkness, but hears a voice telling her that the person she loves will come out of the next room, and she is correct. The Duke emerges from that room, and as they converse, he notices that the servant is acting strangely. She confesses that she can hear the ghost of a bride who apparently can only be heard by her. The ghost tells Alice that despite marrying her beloved, she died falling down the stairs in anger because the ring didn't fit. Since then, she has been waiting for her lover in the afterlife. They try to help the ghost find a perfectly fitting ring so she can rest in peace. The ghost possesses Alice's body to get closer to the Duke, who runs away due to the advances. Later, the ghost exits Alice's body to disappear, wishing happiness to Alice along with the young man and gifting her a bouquet of flowers. The next morning, the Duke and Alice are outside the mansion, waiting in case the witch mentioned by Daleth appears. In the event of her appearance, the young man wanted to banish her as he didn't want to owe a favor to the witch leader, and especially not betray his friend Zane. In the distance, they see someone in a white cloak approaching, claiming to be sent by Daleth, but fainting at that moment. The youths rush to help her and realize she is dehydrated in the form of an octopus. At the mansion, they place her in a pool, and while conversing, she introduces herself as Amelia. She claims to be able to break his curse, having done it once before. Despite his initial rejection to avoid disappointing Zane, she convinces him to try to break the curse. When she attempts to touch the young man to break the spell, he dodges, citing it as a custom, and warns her to be careful as she might take his life. The witch reassures him that her power is greater. To demonstrate, she covers the entire mansion with water as if it were an ocean, and the young couple takes advantage to explore the place with the fishes. After having fun, Amelia asks the Duke to start undoing his curse, so he extends his hand. At the moment of the attempted touch, a very powerful magic appears, causing distress to the witch. She reveals that the magic is attached to him and claims to know who cursed him, Sade, Daleth's twin sister. Alice thinks that what she read in the book may have involved them, but she remains unsure about why they came to the mansion. Meanwhile, the Duke suspects that the witch leader may want to use Zane's power to bring her sister back to life. In that moment, Amelia falls to the ground, having exhausted almost all her power, and the young couple takes her to the ocean, bidding her farewell cordially. Later, the Duke suggests to Alice that they visit their friends to share what they have discovered. After the events that same night, Cuff tells her friend that she spoke with Viola because she falls in love with older people and may end up losing them prematurely. However, Viola confessed that she prefers to go through tough times herself rather than have the person she loves suffer. Cuff asks Zane if he would be capable of leaving her, to which he responds that he would only do it if it were for her own good. The next day, the Duke and Alice head to the circus to visit their friends. The young man decides to disguise himself to avoid being recognized and especially to avoid contact with people. On the way, they encounter Hugo, who overhears mention of the circus. When asked about Cuff, the boy initially thinks the Duke wants to conquer her, but calms down when told they are looking for her due to the curse. He offers to lead them there. Once at the circus, they find Cuff, who is happy to see them and takes them to a comfortable place to talk. Meanwhile, she informs them that Zane is not present. Later, the Duke takes off his disguise, and due to Hugo's questions about his curse, he shows how he withers a flower. The boy declares that he is not afraid, and at that moment, the circus director arrives. Having witnessed the flower demonstration, he proposes that the Duke join the circus. However, the young man falls, surprised by the suggestion. When the director leaves, he suggests they should at least try it since his curse could make him popular. Alice decides to practice trapeze with Cuff, and Hugo attempts to teach juggling to the Duke, who seems unable to concentrate. After a while, the young man shows what he achieved in his juggling practice, performing it perfectly. Then Cuff arrives carrying Zane, who is in a drunken state, and realizes that their friends have come to visit. Meanwhile, in the demon realm, Daleth is at a tomb where Sharon is buried. At that moment, a witch named Ket arrives, to whom Daleth shows Alice's mother's body. She explains that although she doesn't breathe, her heart still beats. Daleth valued her when they met and wanted to help her resume her life as if nothing happened. She asks Ket to keep the secret and help her bring Zane back to the witch world by going to the human world. After Ket goes to find her girlfriend Tet so they can work together, Daleth remembers her sister hurting her, leaving marks on her face simply for looking identical, since they were twins. The next day, at a confectionery, while Cuff leaves to place an order, the Duke tells Zane that Daleth wants to use his power. Zane responds that the time to leave the city has come because he doesn't want to endanger his friend. However, she overhears them when she returns but pretends not to listen. In the circus evening show, everyone presents their acts while Zane watches from a distance. However, when it's Cuff's turn, two young girls arrive to seduce the witch. Soon, Zane realizes they are witches from the demon realm, along with Daleth. She asks him to return with them or else they will harm Cuff. He reluctantly agrees since the plan was to return once he could say goodbye to his friends. The witch tells him she will come for him in a few days. The next day, the circus is set up in the town, and the Duke is excited to perform for them. Hugo seeks out Cuff, informing her that Zane needs to talk to her and is waiting in a passage in the town. Hugo asks Cuff to make her happy if Zane confesses his feelings, then leaves them alone. Instead of revealing that he is leaving, Zane thanks Cuff for being with him. However, she realizes he wants to leave her and becomes angry and saddened because he doesn't disclose the real reason for his departure. Upset, she tells him they are no longer friends, but he stops her, expressing his love and assuring her that everything he does is to protect her. As the performance is about to begin, a woman dressed in white passes by the Duke and his servant. Cuff arrives, appearing disoriented, and Zane follows her. Unexpectedly, a giant carnivorous plant destroys everything during the circus act, controlled by the witch Ket. Zane realizes that Daleth is behind all this, and the plant follows little Hugo, capturing him. A snake appears, telling the witches that to save Hugo, they must go with her. When Zane is about to use his magic, the Duke uses his curse to wither the carnivorous plant, freeing Hugo and all the circus members who were captured. The witches are surprised, flee the scene, and Zane worries because the leader could attack again. However, Cuff asks him to solve this together without using his power and without destroying the circus, which is essential to them. She runs away, shouting that she will answer his love declaration later. Cuff starts looking for Daleth, climbing onto the roofs of the town. At that moment, another enormous plant threatens the place again, capturing the protagonist this time. However, the circus members manage to save him. Meanwhile, Daleth distracts Zane with an illusion of his friend and seizes the opportunity to endanger the present Cuff. With a powerful gust of wind, Zane knocks the witch down, leaving her hanging by one hand. When Zane realizes his friend is in danger, she asks him not to use his magic. The witch uses the illusion of the young Cuff to plead with him to save her. Realizing that he is the only one who can protect his friend's smile, Zane uses his power to stop time and save Cuff. They seize the moment to catch the witch's accomplices. Before returning to reality, Cuff responds to Zane's love declaration with a kiss. When time starts again, they deceive the people, making them believe it was an illusion from the circus, but the Duke realizes it is not true. While everyone cleans up the mess they cause in the town, a woman in white approaches Alice and the Duke, asking to talk. The Duke realizes it is Daleth, and he confronts her for putting the circus in danger. She explains that thanks to Zane's power, they benefited, and she might help Alice awaken her mother in the future. Alice responds that her mother died in an accident, but the witch insists it's not true, claiming that a man from the mansion, Rob, lied to her. Alice is unsure whether to believe her, and if it is true, it would make her happy. Cuff arrives and hits Daleth, making her mask disappear, revealing her face to everyone. In the evening, everyone gathers in a bar to celebrate the circus's success. The circus director asks Cuff and Zane if they are witches, suspecting it, and paralyzes them. However, he is delighted, and the other circus members are not surprised as they consider themselves strange people. The director reassures them, saying that everyone in the circus is a family, making Cuff happy. He also reveals that he is married to a witch who is an octopus, surprising Alice and the Duke as they know her, and mention that she tried to help them break the spell. Taking advantage of the moment when everyone is together, the witches announce that they are now a couple, making everyone happy for them. Later, Alice and the Duke bid farewell to their friends and return home. After 4 days away from the mansion, the young ones return, and Rob is delighted as he feels lonely. In the main mansion, Walter informs his mother that he has completed all his academic tasks. Due to her cold response, the young man is even more determined to become the heir. Upon leaving the room, he encounters his sister, who is devouring a tower of macarons. Noticing that she doesn't offer him any, he remarks that she has gained weight and suggests that their beloved Rob won't like it if she remains in that condition. Viola decides to go on a diet and start exercising with Walter's help. When Viola is about to give up, her brother motivates her to keep striving, assuring her that this way she will achieve anything she sets her mind to. Viola recalls that when they were children, her brother helped her when she felt sad, just like now. Meanwhile, in the Duke's mansion, Rob is happy about Alice and the Duke's return. He prepares tea for them in a room filled with various artifacts, including some magical objects given to the Duke. When Alice attempts to look at a golden box, Rob gives her a book containing all the illustrations the Duke drew as a child. The young man also presents gifts sent by the circus members and their wizard friends. The maid gives her a gift, coffee beans, while the young man brings a chessboard. The next day, Zane and Cuff are on a date at the zoo. Zane seems somewhat annoyed because Hugo is also with them, and the director took the opportunity to ask them to find more people. Despite this, Zane can't stop thinking about Daleth and what she might be plotting, along with the uncertainty about the awakening of Alice's mother. Cuff interrupts his thoughts, asking him to continue enjoying the afternoon. Later, the little boy expresses his affection for Cuff, explaining that he lacks friends to spend time with and that she takes care of him. They finish the zoo visit, and the boy leaves them alone, crossing paths with Walter, who appears to be heading toward a dark passage. That night, while Zane and Cuff were heading to visit the mansion, they got caught in a snowstorm. They take shelter in a cave, deciding to play to pass the time. Eventually, Cuff asks if Zane has been thinking about Daleth. When he confirms it, she reassures him, saying they will be together. Zane expresses his desire to undo the Duke's spell, but is unsure if his power is sufficient. He considers facing Sade, a powerful witch, as the most challenging part. Now we see Alice and the Duke inside a dream book, where both have the mission to hunt the wolf in the Little Red Riding Hood story. If they succeed, she will grant them a wish. Upon reaching the wolf, who is sleeping, they finally manage to capture it, and due to the absence of its mother, it turns into a puppy. They give it to Little Red Riding Hood, but she doesn't grant them any wishes. The Duke wakes up from the dream and sees Alice sleeping next to him in the library. That night, Walter feels a pain, thinking that his mother always favored his older brother over him. She and Viola want the family heir to be the Duke, and for that reason, his mother always watches out the window of her room, hoping the young man will return home after breaking the spell. However, Walter plans to go to the demon realm if there is a red moon to find out about his brother's curse. Unaware that his mother is watching, he plans to go to the demon realm to investigate his brother's curse. When she leaves, Walter manages to cross the portal through the mirror. At the same time, Alice tells the Duke that she also plans to go to the demon realm to find out if what Daleth told her was true. The Duke decides to accompany her, and both cross the portal through the mirror. When they arrive in the realm, they notice that Walter is also there. However, upon mentioning his name, the witches detect his presence, so Alice is asked to stay with her brother while the Duke distracts the witches. On the way, Walter asks Alice to return home, but she only follows the Duke's orders, who asks her to stay by his side. The young man remembers the maid from childhood and questions why someone like her cannot live in such a dark place. She replies that she is happy being with the Duke and tells him not to misinterpret his brother. However, this causes Walter to become desperate as he compares himself to the Duke. When they finally reach the church where Daleth is, a small wizard appears and steals Alice's necklace. Walter tries to catch him, but the wizard taunts him about being second place in his family, leaving Walter in shock. Later, both chase the wizard to a small house where he hid. After searching and chasing him throughout the house, the young man corners him and realizes they are two twin brothers. The older one instructs the younger to not always obey him blindly, as he can rebel against him. The young wizard returns Alice's necklace, and she thanks him. After resolving the necklace issue, they are back in the church, and Walter asks Alice to stay outside while he tries to enter from another side. Inside the church, Daleth is crying over the scars her sister left on her, but Walter hears her and tells her that he understands. However, without hesitation, she uses her magic to throw him off the chandelier where he was standing. Realizing that he is the Duke's brother, she asks him why he is there, and he replies that unfortunately, he heard everything. Despite knowing he shouldn't sympathize with a witch, he fully understands her situation. Due to his older brother, others have decided what she should do with her life. Though Walter came to investigate his brother's curse, he cannot leave a lady crying. The witch blushes and nervously denies being a lady, as she is full of scars and not all like one. However, Walter stops her, saying that despite having scars, she is beautiful and should have more confidence in herself. At that moment, they are interrupted by witches Ket and Tet, who inform the leader that they have captured Alice and the Duke. They quickly close the door since Daleth isn't wearing her mask. Walter tells the witch that to face her scars, she must acknowledge them. He tries to show that she is worth more than his brother. Hearing his advice, the witch gathers courage and reveals her face to all the witches, and everyone congratulates her as they can now see her beauty. Cuff and Zane welcome her and take her to where the girl is, who is looking after a lion that is now part of the circus. Later, both decide to take a stroll through the city, and Viola seizes the opportunity to buy clothes for Cuff, who looks very happy with the dress. She tells the girl that she should consider becoming a designer, but Viola responds that unfortunately, she cannot, as her life is already decided. After finishing their walk, they head to the circus, since the show was about to start. Following the events in the demon realm, the young ones are still there. Daleth releases the Duke and Alice and asks everyone to follow her to show them something. On the way, both Walter and Daleth tease the Duke for being a coward, so it seems the witch sided with the younger brother after helping her face her fear. Still, she also realizes that her heart starts racing every time he looks at her. At the end of the tour, everyone enters a dark room where the witch shows Alice her mother's body, telling her that a man with an eye patch lied to her about her mother. She is under a sleeping curse that her sister, just like the Duke, placed on her. It is challenging to break the curse since her sister was a prodigious witch. Alice tries to take her mother with her, but ends up accepting that the witch should be the one to take care of her. The Duke takes the opportunity to ask about his curse, so Daleth shows them her memories of that day in the mansion. The Duke is playing with his brother but stops to ask Sharon about Alice. She responds that Alice is in her room with a smile. In the distance, Sade is with Daleth, hidden in the trees observing Sharon. At that moment, Daleth begins to feel overwhelmed and fearful of seeing her sister again. So she dispels the illusion, telling them that she will provide information on another occasion. She asks Walter for permission to visit him, and he agrees. After dispelling the illusion, she sends everyone home so Alice and the Duke are left in the mansion, confirming that Sharon is alive. As they walk through the mansion corridor, they believe that Daleth is not as bad a witch as they thought, even thinking that they could become friends. The next day, Alice gives the Duke a gift sent by Zane, a magic lamp. When he rubs the lamp, a genie with the body and face of Alice appears, granting him 3 wishes. For one of his wishes, the young man asks to break the curse, and the genie fulfills it. The young man is surprised as it was done easily, but the genie tells him that to lift the curse, he had to pass it on to someone else. Feeling guilty for what the unknown person would endure, he uses his last wish to have the curse back. During the night, while Alice is taking a bath, she thinks about her friends who are now a couple and had their first kiss, something she also wishes for. The Duke accompanies her outside the mansion as she heads to her room. After conversing, they say their goodbyes, but she feels the urge to kiss him, so she decides to look for him, and when she finds him in the hallway, she writes on the window for him to give her a kiss. She places her hands on the window, moving closer to him, and he also does the same. Finally, they share their first kiss through the glass. After the kiss, Alice runs back to her room. One rainy day, Walter sees Daleth waiting for him outside one of the mansion windows. He invites the witch inside for tea. Once inside, Daleth realizes the mansion is very quiet, and she recalls knowing Walter's mother from afar when they were young. Sharon used to bring happiness and fun to the mansion, but after her departure, the atmosphere returned to its former cold state. When Walter leaves to get more tea, Daleth leaves him a letter, asking to meet again later. Meanwhile, in the Duke's mansion, Alice talks to Rob about what Daleth told her regarding him and the lie about her mother. Alice forgives the elderly man, understanding that he did it to protect her. Rob starts telling her about witches, mentioning that they first appeared when the mansion served as the main residence, and the Duke's grandfather, who was very religious, never suspected them. The grandfather hired both him and Sharon, and after the grandfather's death, the witches stopped visiting. The last time he saw them, they were carrying Sharon, but he couldn't do anything due to the conflict caused by the Duke's curse. Alice thanks him for being honest, and as she enters the mansion, Rob stays in the rain, reminiscing about the day the Duke's grandfather helped him when he was on the street. Zane is outside the circus, watching the rain when Daleth appears, telling him that she will collaborate with him from now on to reach her goal. Zane ends up believing her, and she asks for his help to investigate her sister through the registration book she pretended to destroy. At night, Cuff and the Duke celebrate a small second anniversary party for Alice in the mansion. When Alice arrives, the Duke shows her a small cake he made for her with love. Alice thanks him, expressing her wish to stay forever by his side. Cuff interrupts them, giving her a gift from Viola, a dress. She seizes the opportunity to change in front of the young man, and then the 3 of them enjoy the rest of the night. Later, due to the rain, the roof of Alice's room collapses. The Duke offers her to sleep inside the mansion. Ket, the witch working with Daleth, appears, asking if they have seen her. Distracted by the hole in the roof, she proposes to fix it but requests they leave her to work in peace tonight. Alice and the Duke are in their room to rest. The young man suggests she use the bed while he sleeps on the floor. However, during the night, the Duke cannot sleep and notices that Alice still has the flower he once gave her. He goes out to offer Ket something to drink, and she tells him that Daleth has been leading them by force since Sade's absence. Ket believes Daleth lacks the qualities of a leader, thinking she should live as she wishes. Recently, Ket has noticed her interest in Walter, suggesting that if their leader loves him, they could live peacefully among humans. The next day, Ket finishes repairing Alice's room and suggests they call her girlfriend and Daleth for the next pajama party. The maid agrees, making the witch very happy, unintentionally breaking the room's roof again. Zane, Cuff, and Hugo are in the city when some youths intercept them to bother Hugo, his former friends from when he used to steal. After bothering him, they run away and Hugo follows them, finding them lying on the ground. A blonde boy and an old woman attacked them when they tried to steal, and the 2 only defended themselves. Turning around, Hugo realizes those people are no longer there, so he decides to tell Zane about it. On a quiet morning, the Duke is reading a book when he sees a somewhat suggestive image. At that moment, Alice appears, suspecting what he was up to. However, she is surprised to find him on the 3rd floor window, and he explains that it's thanks to a flying broom gifted by Ket. Cuff and Zane visit the Duke to stay with him for a while, as a strange couple has been looking for him. The blonde boy and the old woman that Hugo saw. The director believes it's for the Duke to use his time power, so he gave them a vacation to hide. The Duke accepts, considering them as his friends. The Duke asks Zane to speak privately, taking the opportunity to return the registration book he pretended to destroy. Suddenly, Nico, the blonde boy from the city, appears in front of them, while the old woman interrupts Cuff and Alice's work. In the Duke's room, Nico approaches him and manages to touch him, but the Duke's curse has no effect on him. Nico then attacks them, causing the room to spin. After it stops, he introduces himself as Miko, a magician seeking the time-wielding warlock. In the hallway, Cuff tries to defend Alice, but the old woman, Ichi, uses cigarette smoke to take away the witch's powers and introduces herself as Nico's wife. The Duke asks Zane to listen to the magician's story to understand why he wants to use the warlock's power. Nico explains that he carries the curse of immortality cast by a witch named Sade. Even though he killed her, his curse persists. He reveals that when he was an old man, Sade told him it was too early for humans to use magic, turning him into a child and cursing him with immortality. Later, he found out that Sade cursed the Duke as a child. They decided to confront her, and though they defeated her, Nico survived due to his curse, while his comrades did not. Zane starts to believe him and asks why he needs to use the warlock's power. Nico explains he plans to go back in time before the curse and destroy Sade again with the help of all the magicians. Nico requests them to go to the magic school, where Zane can learn to control his power, and the Duke can learn to use magical weapons. Ichi also asks Cuff to attend the school to become more powerful. The magicians leave, urging the warlocks and the Duke to assist them at the magic school. The boy calls his friend, who turns into a flying horse holding a carriage. As they fly away, the Duke grabs onto the carriage, expressing his desire not to kill the witch but to accept her without fear, hoping they can become friends. Nico hands the Duke a backpack with information about the school and throws him into the void with a magical parachute. Later, Cuff and Zion leave the mansion as they no longer need to hide after the encounter with the magicians. Additionally, Cuff wants to prepare herself to attend the magic school, become stronger, and protect all their friends. After the events, the Duke decides to go to the magic school along with Zane and Cuff because he agrees with Nico's plan to go back in time, but disagrees with getting rid of Sade. He wants to talk to the magician about it. Later, as they read the servant registry book, which is actually Sharon's diary, they find a page where she wrote about meeting Sade. Sade claimed to be a nun with knowledge of divination, as she could predict Sharon's past. Although they assume they had a good relationship, they don't understand why she cursed her. While contemplating what Sharon wrote, the Duke believes that maybe the witch had a special power similar to Zane's, but she could read minds. In the main mansion, Daleth is once again among the trees with Ket, observing Walter, who is unaware of her presence. However, Viola notices and kindly asks her to spend time together. Viola invites her into the mansion for tea. Viola seizes the moment to apply makeup and cut Daleth's hair, as she had visited her brother and noticed Daleth's interest in him. Viola thinks Walter still needs to mature. Viola, with her friendly personality, asks if the witch hates her face since she never looks in the mirror. Daleth responds that she hates her scars because they don't disappear. Viola tries to cheer her up by suggesting to hide them with makeup. However, Daleth can't stop thinking about the moment her sister ruined her face and became emotional. Seeing her sad, Viola hugs her to comfort her. After finishing her makeup, they go to see Walter, but he doesn't notice the change in Daleth. She leaves and both her sister and Ket become upset with Walter. Daleth turns around to say goodbye to him and smiles, leaving him astonished as it's the first time he has seen her smile. At night, Viola visits her brother, teasing him about touching Alice. However, she realizes he's not paying attention and suspects he's hiding something. Viola tries to find out by searching through his things. She discovers the backpack left by the magician containing a beautiful dress. Walter tries to make excuses, but Cuff arrives and unintentionally mentions the magic school in front of Viola. Excited, Viola shows the dress to the butler and apologizes to the Duke for speaking in front of his sister. However, Viola believes it's time to tell them that they are witches. Later, everyone travels by train to the magic school. Walter joins them as he wants to investigate his brother's curse. In reality, his mother asked him to accompany his sister and gain knowledge, common among nobles. Daleth learns that Walter is going on a journey, so she decides to follow him to make sure he's safe. On the train, Cuff and Zane inform Viola that they are witches, but she is not surprised as she entered the mansion through the second-floor window. After the train journey, a long path leads them to the school, where Nico and Ichi are waiting. Inside the school, Nico introduces the other students, 4 in total, each with different powers. He also introduces the other professor, the man who turned into a horse in the Duke's mansion. Later, while the Duke and Walter take a bath, the younger brother explains the reason for attending the magic school and reveals his plan to go back in time to prevent Sade from cursing them. Meanwhile, Daleth spies on Walter from outside the school, suspecting that he met another woman. After all this, when Cuff finishes her bath, Ichi is waiting for her to begin her training since the magician will be her teacher and promised to make her even more powerful. Her trainer creates a water duplicate of Cuff and challenges her to defeat it without using her powers. Despite destroying it several times, the figure reforms, leaving the witch almost drained of energy until her double finally overpowers her. Ichi realizes that Cuff overthinks and doesn't use her mind effectively in the fight, which is what she needs to work on to enhance her power. The next day, Daleth manages to break the barrier protecting the school. After theoretical classes with a third teacher, where everyone seemed bored, they continue with their classes with Professor Ichi. She tells them that their training will be merciless, and she gives each one a magical tool they must discover the function of. Once they figure it out, they can rest. During the training, Ichi attacks everyone with her water powers while students try to understand their tool's functions. When a stream of water is about to attack Viola, Walter stands in front of her and stops the water with a magical tool, which turns out to be a hilt that transforms into a sword with magic. Ichi congratulates the young man and rewards him by letting him keep the magical item. At the door, Nico watches them. When he turns around, he sees a woman in white passing through the school hallway and immediately thinks it's Sade. Daleth is in the school library, but Nico, following her, mistakes her for Sade. The witch decides to play along to gather information about the place. The magician confronts her, revealing that it's impossible for her to still be alive after he destroyed her. Due to the curse he gave her, he cannot age alongside his wife. The witch tries to put him to sleep with her power through an illusion, but Ichi appears, dispelling the illusion. Both of them claim to fight her. At that moment, Ket arrives, who had lost sight of her leader. Seeing that they are confronting each other in that place, Nico requests the evacuation of his students. Hearing this, Daleth realizes it's a magic school attended by Walter, so she decides to confess that she is not Sade, but her sister. Later, Daleth and Ket join the classes with the others during Nico's class. He reveals that their class will be about Sade, where everyone will provide information about her to help with their curses. That night, Zane proposes to the Duke, Alice, and Daleth to try going back to the past as practice, since controlling his power is easier in that place, though he still needs improvement. Before the witch crosses the portal, the young man asks if her sister had the power to read minds, to which she replies that she cannot tell him as she is also cursed by Sade. After passing through the portal, they return to the mansion before the Duke is cursed, but everyone gets separated when crossing the portal. Zane is behind the trees, assuming he sees Daleth, but the woman turns around, revealing herself to be Sade. She realizes that the wizard comes from the future. Meanwhile, Daleth is floating above the mansion, confirming the Duke's statement. Alice and the Duke hide from the mansion's servants, so they cannot see them, with their hat flies caught by an adult man dressed in a suit, Victor, the Duke's grandfather. Meanwhile, Sade talks to Zane about a past love, trying to read his mind. She reveals that once in her life she fell in love, but someone interfered with her path. At that moment, she tries to attack the wizard, but is rescued by Daleth, who asks him to open a portal while she distracts her sister. Sade realizes that her sister is also there and that in the future, she stopped loving her. When the Duke says goodbye to his grandfather, something begins to suck them into a portal. It's Zane, who asks them to leave as Sade has realized their presence. As Daleth crosses the portal, Sade appears behind her, trying to follow, but her sister stops her. As the portal closes, the witch manages to see Alice. After returning from the past, the Duke takes a bath where he appears frustrated, unsure if it's possible to talk to Sade and become friends, as she is genuinely dark.